The President of Mexico, López Obrador, since taking office, has made public the way that he wants to confront trafficking in his country. His policy is based on the premise, hugs, not bullets. This would not be the situation today, since the government's actions in recent times have given the impression that its idea of dealing with this problem has changed. This conclusion is reached, as we've said, after analyzing some behaviors that the government has had in front of the traffic. Among others, we refer to the enormous deployment of forces that took place last March 14th in the area of Nuevo Laredo. As a result of this and other injections of police and military forces, there have been a series of denounced events, which have been caused by these forces. One of them occurred on March 29th, when military personnel, part of this group that was seeking to increase security in the area, mistakenly detained 3 young men. 2 of them ended up with gunshot wounds, and the other one was seriously injured, as when he was taken to the hospital, part of his leg had to be amputated. Is AMLO out of hugs for traffickers? Or is the situation going out of his control? While he gives more attributions to the military and police forces. We're going to answer these questions and many more, so stay tuned. Don't forget to follow us, smack that notification bell, and like the video. One of the events that generated the most commotion concerning these violations was that of March 24th. That night, 3 young men, approximately 20 years old, were driving a black Tahoe-type pickup truck through a middle-class neighborhood in Nuevo Laredo. When, just before crossing a bridge, they realized that they were being followed by 3 military trucks. They then felt a blow to their trunk, which caused them to crash into a passenger truck, and then into a curb. Being extremely frightened by what just happened, these boys got out of the car showing their hands, and while trying to get down on the ground, they began to hear gunshots. Immediately, Orozco Martinez began to shout that they had no weapons and they were asking for help. That didn't matter to the military, as they continued beating and abusing the detainees. Rodriguez Torres and Orozco Martinez were effectively attacked while they were subdued, lying on the floor. After this event, it was shown that the detainees were shot at close range and in the back. After a search of the van in which 20-year-olds were traveling, no weapons or illicit substances were found. And, as if this weren't enough, Raimundo Ramos Vasquez, president of the Human Rights Committee in Nuevo Laredo, declared that, at first, the military didn't allow ambulances to enter the perimeter, and that the paramedics had to wait more than 14 minutes to be able to help the young men and take them to the general hospital. Ramos Vasquez stated that there were other irregularities in the process, as these military authorities didn't notify the Attorney General's office and the Tamaulipas Prosecutor's office, and should have been done. So this was considered a criminal scene. Federico Javier Espinosa declared to have heard conversations between the military, saying that they should pick up the shells so as to not leave evidence. 2 of these young men, Carlos Eduardo Orozco Martinez and Francisco Javier Espinosa, after being taken to the hospital, were discharged as they didn't receive major wounds. The third, not so fortunate, since after being observed in the hospital, the lower part of his leg had to be amputated due to the previous gunshot wounds. In the early morning hours of March 14th, 1 week before the shootout mentioned above, Mexican troops managed to capture Juan Gerardo, El Huevo, Trevino Chavez. This trafficker unleashed a bloody confrontation against military forces on that morning of March 14th, but that did not prevent his capture. In a diplomatic meeting with Alejandro Mayorkas, U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security, a few hours after the arrest, Mexican Foreign Minister Marcelo Ebrard referred to Trevino Chavez's capture as the big arrest of the decade. Following the capture, the Mexican government deployed 2 new army units, each with up to 600 soldiers to patrol the streets of Nuevo Laredo. Beyond this huge deployment, it's been concluded that it's not done so much to dismantle criminal organizations. It's presumed that it would be a way to demonstrate the state's great power and to impose fear on these illicit groups. On the other hand, it is presumed that this mobilization of military forces in the area has increased the risk of further human rights abuses in a city where the Mexican armed forces have been accused of extrajudicial executions and forced disappearances. The Human Rights Committee of Nuevo Laredo reported that so far in 2022, members of the armed forces have filed 6 complaints of human rights violations. Among the victims of military personnel belonging to the Mexican Army and National Guard are minors and women. The first of these complaints were made by journalist Angel Herrera after military forces broke into the parking lot of a television station where he works and carried out an inspection of his car, without the corresponding search warrant. Among many other irregular situations on the part of the military authorities, we can also mention the one on April 27th, in which a woman and her minor son were harassed by soldiers of the Mexican army, while they were sitting on the benches of the municipal presidency. The victim was identified as Jessica Villar and her son, Gerardo, who were waiting to enter the government building to request help from the municipal authorities for medicines. Another alarming situation occurred on May 5th, when soldiers of the 16th Cavalry Regiment tortured Jose Rogelio in front of the Macario Zamora military barracks and caused damage to his private vehicle, which was recorded on video and presented as evidence when the incident was reported. Because of these abuses and many others by the authorities, Nuevo Laredo Human Rights Committee demanded the relocation of the 16th Cavalry Regiment. Authorities of the committee stated that this claim is because the personnel is out of control of the Secretary of National Defense, which is the agency on which it depends. 6 complaints of abuse of authority have been filed. In 5 of these, personnel of the Ministry of National Defense is identified and responsible for the abuses. In 1, members of the National Guard, while in 3 of these cases, the Attorney General's Office of the Republic has opened investigation files. Beyond the efforts made by the Commission and the evidence provided by the victims of these events, according to the authorities of the Human Rights Commission of Nuevo Laredo, there has been no conclusive response to stop the abuses, much less to clarify the facts. When López Obrador was elected president of Mexico, one of his promises was to approach the war against trafficking in a different way than his predecessor Felipe Calderón, who 12 years earlier began his confrontation against organized crime, and who, because of his way of carrying out his fight, calamitously increased the toll of homicides, massacres, and disappearances in the country. The main slogan of the policy carried out so far by López Obrador was based on the premise of hugs, not bullets, differentiating himself from Calderón's policy. He promised to demilitarize the country and confront these organizations with education and employment opportunities. Beyond words, facts and results demonstrate the actions of the politicians. Numbers speak for themselves. In AMLO's administration, the power of these armed forces has been strengthened and their role in society has been expanded. It has invested $10,000 in the armed forces, increasing the budget for the Army by 22% and the Marines by 17%. He has stated on other occasions that one of his goals, although he clarified that it's politically unfeasible, is to disband the Army and thus demonstrate that Mexico is a pacifist country. He created the National Guard, a domestic police force controlled by civilians, to ease tensions in this prolonged confrontation against criminal groups. This doesn't make much sense, as this force is commanded by an ex-military man. Its ranks are largely composed of ex-soldiers, and they've already received complaints of abuse of authority. It's because of this hypocrisy that many Mexicans question AMLO's pacifist position. The National Guard is the army in another uniform, says Mexican writer Esteban Hilades in the Washington Post in 2019. Soldiers being trained by soldiers to do what soldiers do, indefinitely. Let the numbers do the talking. In 2021, there have been nationwide 35,000 homicides. That's twice as many in 2015. On the other hand, the territory of Nuevo Laredo is much less dangerous than it was 10 years ago. Tamaulipas is no longer among the 10 most dangerous states in the country. In 2018, 1,400 homicides were registered, and in 2020, 800. The Mexican president states that his position is to continue betting on the Capo strategy. That consists of offering large rewards to anybody who provides information that helps find and capture the leaders of these organizations. At the same time, the president continues to militarize the country to attack these leaders. The big criticism of this approach to the war is that it doesn't take into account the number of people involved in each and every one of these networks. It could be counterproductive, because capturing the ringleaders of these illicit associations could lead to more violence if these groups, left leaderless, subsequently fracture and fight each other. So what do you think about AMLO's way of dealing with this? Are you with him? Is he saying one thing and doing another thing on purpose? Is it all part of a bigger plan? We read you, so don't forget to like our video, hit the notification bell, comment your stuff, and subscribe to our channel.